Megan as our co-host yet.
Oh,
I
we
just
do
got
now.
Megan over.
Okay, wonderful.
Thanks, David.
All right.
Can you tell me how I get my face up?
Good, good.
Well, let me take over, Evan. I'll take over the fridge.
Janelle, do you have everyone here who you've been waiting for?
We are ready to roll.
Awesome. Then I would love to welcome everyone to today's noon session with Janelle Field and all of her lovely colleagues. I am Devin Tomzik, your moderator for the panel today. I'm going to be monitoring the chat both on YouTube Live to all the folks watching there and on Zoom. And so, Janelle, if I see some questions that need answering, I might jump in and just pause you guys for a second so we can answer those. Sound good?
My system preferences. Just a minute here. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay.
All right. Vicki is asking if we will be able to see the speakers. Right now, I can see them. So, Vicki, if you can't see them, why don't you send me a chat to let me know what it is you need help with.
Okay, here we go. All right. So you see my screen right now? We're ready to go.
We can.
All right. Oh gosh, hang on here. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to present. All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session. We're very excited to be with you here today. I just think back to a pandemic that was back in 1918. We would have never been able to do what we are doing right now, getting everybody together, networking and learning with each other. So thank you. So today we are going to be talking about turning disruptions into possibilities for today and beyond. I really think as we have gone through distance learning, it's really highlighted the importance of schools to our families, to people, to society, to everything that we are very valued as educators. But it's also amplified, I think, and sometimes really brought to the surface of our equities. And I think in the last decades, we've been producing our learners really to be workers, and we've missed the humanities of education. So that's going to be our focus of our conversation today, is really, what do we think schools should be? What are they for? What should we be teaching? And what probably should be changing and not be teaching? So that's our theme of today. So I am Janelle Field. I am the Belgrade Brunel Rosa Teaching and Learning Engagement Coach. And along with me today, I have Megan Amundsen, who is a 5th and 6th grade math teacher, Erin Castle, our middle school and high school science teacher, and Alana Hunter, our middle and high school teacher. I just feel that they are at the front line. I'm the teaching and a learning engagement coach, and they drive me, but they are in the front line of doing this on a daily basis with our learners. So when we think about what does powerful learning look like, I want to right now go and look and have you think about in our Padlet about what does powerful learning look like. So I'm going to put this into our chat right now. I'm going to put that in there, okay? And I'm going to get that. And I just want you to be thinking about, add some thoughts about what it does empowered learning look like, right? So right now I'm going to bring you into our chat and have you open it from here. There's your Padlet to contribute to. I'm just going to give you a few minutes to type in there.
While people are typing, I will remind you that you have access to all of Janelle's presentation information through the MNDL Summit website, but I'll also plop those in the chat, both on the Zoom and the YouTube Live for people to access once they're done adding to the Padlet.
All right. So what I'm going to do is also, this will be put as a resource on there, and we can come back in. But I love the things that we are seeing in a learner-centered learning environment. Your student voice and choice, your flexibility, your personalization, real-world connections, absolutely. So I think how you are showing things there that really connects to why we did not let learner-centered go when we went to distance learning. So we think about when we started distance learning, how would the world change if every student regularly had powerful learning experiences? So we always keep that in the back of my mind, even with distance learning, that we need to give our learners those learner-centered, powerful learning experiences. And so I think about too, how I've been visiting with learners and I've been interviewing learners, and they have been learning a lot of things beyond our content. They've been doing a lot of like gardening. They've been doing cooking. They have been collaborating in different ways in different areas. So I really think that we really need to rethink education and think about that anytime, anywhere, any place type of learning, that sometimes that authentic learning outdoes our content that we are providing for them. So we're thinking about what kind of authentic content we can also bring to them. So there's a lot of silver lining for learning in what we're doing. I think we have to continue to think, even though we're stressed in the distance learning, there's a lot of things coming to the surface that we are going to need to continue to do. So I also wanted to share some opportunities with you through Reimagine Education and From Gathering to Transformation. This will be also in my resources, but we're really trying to grow our network of really bringing learner-centered learning and always go back to what schools are for, what we should be teaching, and what we should be changing and getting rid of. So lots of opportunities to join us in the next month of this. So at BBE, we always focus on not the yes, but the yes, and to reimagine all the possibilities. The things that we have thought about obstacles in the brick and mortar school, we have let go also in distance learning. So when you visit with us, you will see that we do not have box curriculum. We have let go of that box curriculum and we create the curriculum for what our learners need. I think right now, the biggest thing that we have had is the freedom of no longer that standard testing. So we can look at the interests and the passions and have our learners help us grow in what they want to learn about. And so we've even looked at changing our transcript and looking at what do we want our learners to be when they leave BBE. So I really do believe with this book that an education crisis is a terrible thing to waste. We're making great progress with it. So when I have my colleagues get on, this is what we've been thinking about. What are schools for and what is learning for? So when we went into this, we went into triage, absolutely. We had to act immediately to get our distance learning. There was not a lot of learner-centered going at that time because we were in that triage mode, we were getting going. Now that we have transitioned, we're starting to bring in, which my colleagues will be talking to you about, where we need to go with this and how we can continue learner-centered learning in the distance learning and bring it back into post-pandemic as we return. So we believe here at BBE, schools must change. It may be hard to think about right now, but our learners deserve learning experiences that they are so engaged in. As like Matt Miller would say, they would pay to come to our classrooms. We have to remember we are the change makers along with our learners and their families. So how are we going to activate and help transform that? And that's why we would really like to have you join in with the networking and making this shift. And you will hear my colleagues say that small steps lead to big changes. And that's where we're at with this. So I was looking at this calculation. that in the US, there are over 3.2 million educators. So just think if we could get a group together that 25% of us were developing innovative ideas and acting upon this to be change makers for our learners, how powerful that would be. So our commitment here at BBE is that every child, regardless of their background or circumstance, even with the equities that are all coming to the surface at this time, that our commitment is to give them a learner-centered education. We feel that our 6 C's, our dispositions, at times are just as important or more important as our content. So being able to get those are the things that we design with in our education. We want to make sure that we are really working with that networked age. They were just saying that kindergartners right now, we're preparing for the 21st century, but those kindergartens are going to be living in the 22nd century. So we really need to have that personalized learning at the foundation of what we're doing. So as we went out to distance learning, we were in triage for a while. We were surviving. Now we're starting to get into that redefinition. If we did not have technology in the hands of our learners, what could we not be doing with them? So we're really getting into those 6 C's since we've passed that triage stage and really looking at ways that they can redefine and modify and the ways that we can bring even global and community experts into our distance learning environments. So we talk about personalized versus differentiated versus individualized, and you'll hear that from my colleagues. And what we say is even in distance learning, we're looking at the learning styles of our learners. How do we need to meet them at? We're looking at them through pacing for individualized. Not everybody gets that same recipe at the same time. And then we talk about how can we get more co-creating of learners' activities. That's where we're really pushing to get them to be curious and engaged. I had heard about some problem seekers in some towns where they had taken the groceries and how to sanitize them and get them delivered. I have seen where some learners have started creating podcasts and blog posts about how the pandemic is affecting their lives. Even groups getting together around podcasts and really having some collaborative discussions. So we need to keep the learners at the center, even through distance learning. So what school could be? Look at our learners' autonomy. That's what my colleagues are going to be talking about. How do we engage our learners? How do we give them choice? What school could really be? And I think one of the biggest things that's brought to our attention here is the changing of the school schedules. We don't have the bells. We have that flexibility. We can have them at any time, anywhere, and learning on anything. So in ending, I just want to say, I hope you leave us with learning with love. And learning with love really means that the learners are contributing. They're not just being taught information to regurgitate and bring back to us. They're not letting schooling get in the way of the bells, of the standards, of the testing. We really want you to leave today with learning should look like love. Look at their interests, their passions, the way that you engage them. So those are some examples that I talked about, but I know my colleagues who are at the front line have a lot more to discuss. So learner-centered, we're authentic. We hope we get globally and community connected. How awesome we are now, right now connected. So we want our learners to be innovative, creative, be entrepreneurs, and get them ready for the 22nd century. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Kushel, our middle school and high school science teacher.
Hi, so I am Erin Castle. I teach 7th and 8th grade science along with some high school electives. And Janelle talked a lot about the why. Why is this important? And so I'm going to get into kind of the how, because making this leap to personalized learning, I'm not to my goal yet. I have a lot of goals ahead of me, and I know my colleagues do as well. What I found was that it was really baby steps because students have been trained how to do school for so long. And fortunately, over the last, I don't know, Janelle, how long have we been one-to-one now?
This will be going on year 6.
Okay. So what I feel like I'm seeing such a shift in the middle school because some of my other colleagues who teach younger grades than I do, they're really doing such a fantastic job at getting these kids to advocate for themselves, be independent thinkers and learners. And so then I can keep moving forward myself. So what I started with was really flexible seating. When we went to our one-to-one initiative, you can see here, this is a picture I took in our pilot year of all of a sudden students had these devices and they wanted to sit and learn differently. And so I started researching flexible seating. Do you want to go to the next slide? No, thank you. And then I started looking at like, okay, not all my students are the same. So how am I introducing different ways for them to learn so that they can learn the best way for them? And so really starting to introduce choice into how they learn. So giving them options of live seminars where I'm doing direct instruction, or allowing them to control the pace of a seminar through a video, or giving them reading options, or allowing them to do look through a website and do an activity with that, or do different, or an activity, or lab possibly. So allowing them some choice into what works best for them. Now, at first it wasn't a choice because I needed to establish expectations. So at the beginning of the year, what I do is I have all my students do the exact same thing so that they know what an in-class seminar looks like. They know what a video seminar looks like. They know what reading resources look like, and so on. And so I could establish expectations for all of those things. And then after that, I was able to go into some choices. We go to the next slide. And so what I did is I introduced some self-pacing. So to allow them to learn some time management skills. So here was when I first started doing my rock unit, I started doing just here are your tasks. And so then they would go and decide, are they going to do some of their foundational reading first, or do I want to do some note taking through a seminar or a video? And so then they could kind of start controlling of their pace. What do they want to do first, and so on. And the kids really liked having that control, and some kids didn't like having that control. So I still had some structured, for the kids that needed that structure, I said, day one, focus on this, then day two, do this. And so I'd have things in order. And so they could really just work through the list of tasks. This allowed that structure for those kids that needed it to keep working through that, but then also allow them to start time managing. So let's start doing self-pacing. Field, do you want to go to the next one? And then I actually go to the next slide because I'll just talk about this choice in learning. So this is where I've transitioned now. So as these students have been getting this exposure to choice in the younger grades, I've been able to move past this. So now this is what my rock unit looks like. So what I have here is some foundational work where they go through like some vocabulary. They can decide, these are the current standards for science and English science in middle school. At the top, the rock identification, the rock cycle, fossils. And so each of those is a standard. And then we have our practice beneath that. And so the kids could decide if they want to work down each column to work on each standard, or if they want to do all their foundational work first and then work through all their practice and then work through all their labs. And you can see there, I have instructional videos for help. And then I would also do live help sessions as well. And then for those kids that maybe we're working through, you can see a challenge there. And so some kids, I had kids at all different places, but I did try to keep them within a certain range. So some kids didn't get too far behind. I have benchmarks along the way so they wouldn't get too far behind. And then some of those kids that would go further, you can offer some challenges. And so and then I started offering them choices in how they learn. So you can see some there where it has pick one or pick two. And this week for my distance learning, because really my classroom hasn't changed other than we're not in my classroom. We're doing the exact same things that we would do in my classroom, just at a slower pace, where the kids are having choice. Now I did start, when we first started with our distance learning again, I kind of went back to what I did at the beginning of the year. What are the expectations? We're all going to be doing the same thing to establish expectations and then move forward from there with offering self-pacing, or it was self-paced the whole time, but then offering choices. So like this week, the kids are going to have an option of different topics to dive into with environmental science. And so they have those choices, and those were already built in. So my kids going into distance learning, it wasn't a change for them. They already had these choices and expectations in place. You want to go to the next slide, Field? So my next step then in all of this
Before
is
you move
choice and
on,
assessment.
Erin,
Oh, yes.
could you talk a little bit more about how long online did it take you to establish those expectations with your students?
At the beginning of the school year, I take about a month to go through. Basically, the first unit of the year, I would say, is establishing expectations and giving them opportunities to experience all the different choices that they'll have. And then if I introduce something new during the year, it'll be something that we all work on together so that I can establish those expectations. But it does take a while, and it has been shorter actually over the last couple years because a lot of these choices are being done in younger grades. I mean, I was talking to our kindergarten teacher this spring or I guess late winter, and she was talking about how she's giving her kindergartners choices. And so that is going through all the way through our district. And so those kids are really becoming great advocates for themselves, knowing what they need to learn, knowing if they need maybe more one-on-one with a teacher or small group instruction versus if they need to be on their own. We're finding that the kids are really getting so much better at advocating for themselves and what they need. So my next jump then is going to assessing or choice and assessment of showing what they know. So then then my colleagues are going to talk about how the kids are showing, kind of pacing themselves, and they'll get into how the kids are controlling some of that learning as well.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Kushel. First of all, too, I think when Kushel was getting into about the testing and how we're really trying to get that meaningful evidence that it does not just need to be a test. So, and without the MCAs, it's not ruining our learners' lives. It's not ruining anybody's lives. So I hope that we can also continue with our authentic projects and products and the work and the way that they really want to show their evidence of learning in a learner-centered classroom. All right, so up next, I have Mrs. Amundsen, and she is going to be visiting about the 5th and 6th grade with her pacing and mastery charts, along with Mrs. Hunter will also be, she's in that same area there. Here we go.
Miss Field and I are in the same place, so we can obviously hear each other. So this is my slide. I'm going to share my screen as soon as I finish talking about this. So I teach 5th and 6th grade math, and I started teaching with these grids just this winter. So I didn't do this in the beginning of the first semester. Second semester I started because my 5th and 6th graders were starting to figure out how I teach, figuring out the choices and things like that. So I did not just jump right into this. We really baby stepped our way into the whole pacing, product, everything. I'm going to share my screen. These are linked for you, so you'll have access to everything that I have. Yeah, you'll stop sharing yours, yes. So this is going to be my 6th grade grid that I have going. This is what we're using right now. So in 6th grade, I'm teaching probability. We started this unit right at the beginning before distance learning started. So the way that this works is that the kids start in LO1A. So there's 4 levels. Recall and reproduction is first. So we actually did 1A before we went into distance learning so that we'd already started this and we've figured out what we were doing. And once distance learning started, we had those 2 weeks off where we were figuring out what was going on. We went right into 1B the second week of distance learning. We had a week of where just like what is going to be happening, expectations, things like that. And then we started right away with this. So every week we're getting through about 2 blocks is what I'm hoping kids to do. Depends on, like last week was shorter, so we only did 1 block. But they have a choice to do an in-class seminar or they can do a video lecture. And I left those video lectures linked for you if you want to watch me teach, go for it, whatever. There's notes options that are usually linked here. I just unlinked those. And then they have an assessment choice that they have to get 80% on. Now, I'm not grading any of these assessment choices. They're sending me what they're doing and I'm giving them feedback on it. I'm telling them what they did right, what they did wrong, things like that, helping them, but I'm not putting it in the grade book. It's not something that's graded. It's just there so that they know how they're doing. Especially because as you're moving from block to block, you have to know the first step to get to the second step. So once we've got through level 1, there was a quick check, and I do grade the quick checks. This is a Google form, but they still have to get 80%. So if they don't do well, I have a seminar with them on Zoom and we figure out what they were missing, the block that they missed. We do it again until they figure it out. I also have been using a lot of Desmos just in math. It's super helpful. Level 2 is skills and concepts. So it gets a little bit harder. Same thing, they can have an in-class seminar or a lecture. There's always choices. So I try to do an IXL because some kids really like the IXLs. I try to do something that could be hands-on, and I try to do something digitally that doesn't have to be, just so that every different learning style has a choice. Not every single one has as many choices, just because some things are a little bit harder to do choices on. If you go up to 3A, this is experimental probability. There's not a ton of choices for that. It's just experimenting and seeing what's happening. So these stations have 5 different ways to do experimental probability in it without the choice. Once we get to the assessment, this assessment, we're not there yet, so it's not totally done yet, but the way that I envision it is that the kids are going to have a bunch of different choices. In my classroom, when I usually do assessments, I try to have 3 different choices, and they vary depending on what the subject is. I like to have an interview choice where the kids can talk with me and just work through math, because some kids can't put it onto the paper, but they can tell me exactly what they're doing. I like to have just a typical Google form test choice because some kids really like those. I like to have a flip grid sometimes, or a different technology choice depending on what it is. And then this level 4 is really what's the most exciting, the fun part of this. We choose something about math. It doesn't have to be what we're doing right now, and they just go with it. Some kids love probability. Usually with this, I use the NCAA tournament. Obviously this year I didn't get to do that, but that really gets kids into this because they get to see how it works with sports, and they get to think about, well, this team is better than this team and things like that. And if they love that, they can keep working with that. If that's not their thing, they can go back to fractions. They really like cooking, so they're going to work with fractions some more. Just depends on what it is they're doing. I have the same thing for my 5th grade. So this is the 5th grade one. It looks the exact same, except this one's about data analysis. I'm not going to go through all of this again. 5th graders, this is their 2nd grid, whereas 6th grade, this is their 3rd grid that they've done this year. So it was a little harder to get them into their expectations. And then how do we keep track of all of this? Alana and I use the same sort of tracking system. I've taken kids' names out from this. This where are you column, basically, if they leave my classroom, they have to put where they're going. So if they're going to go sit in the hallway, or they're going to sit by the lockers, or if they're going to sit, we have these entryways, wherever they're sitting, they have to put it. And if I go and check and they're not there, they're kicked back to my classroom because they can't just not be there. Even if they're going to the bathroom, they have to put it in there. And then we've got this key up here. So in this column 1 row. So if they're red, they need help right away. Red and yellows don't really do anything in distance learning because they're just emailing me. But the greens and the blues really help me out. So the greens, they're working on that assignment. The blues, they need to be checked on it. So they need that feedback on it. So they tell me what they've worked on. So like in here, they've said they did these IXLs, and I know exactly what to go check. I try to go through and delete these sometimes to get rid of them, just so that it's clear. And then I will write back into these boxes. Like these kids did the quick check and I sent them their corrections, or they need to Zoom with me. So they need to check their email and see what they need to do next. And then they turn purple if they're finished. So you can see that all the kids are finished with 1A and 1B. These kids back here that say they're done with 1C, but haven't sent me what they need yet, I'm checking in with them. My trackers don't always look this purple. Sometimes it's a lot of white. Sometimes it's kids haven't done anything for 3 weeks and I'm trying to get a hold of them. I obviously showed you the best looking one on purpose. So this kid's a couple days behind. This yellow line is where they need to be by the end of the week. Now we're a 4-day school week, so we haven't started this week yet. So I will move this 2 spaces over for the end of next week. This red line isn't usually there. I added it for distance learning just because I don't want the kids getting super far ahead of me. I found that I had a couple kids flying in math, but weren't doing anything for social studies or weren't doing anything for science. So I added this line here just to help the other subjects out and to help me out without having to get everybody ahead of me, because it was just getting to be, they love math, so they're doing it for 4 hours and they're doing 0 everything else. So once they get to this stop here, they can't go any farther. And it just keeps going like this. So
Megan, can you clarify, are you filling out the tracker or are the students filling out the tracker?
the students are filling out the tracker, but they are not allowed to turn purple. They can turn it any color but purple. In regular learning, it's really helpful because the kids can help each other out. Like if they see somebody turn yellow or red and they're sitting right next to them, they can be like, oh, hey, I've already finished that one. What's going on? In distance learning, that's a little bit harder. I am trying to get people to collaborate together, but it's not always super effective. I have had a couple kids turn purple through distance learning, and I've clicked this little all changes saved in Drive button and was like, oh, you guys have turned this purple, email you what's going on, changed it back. That has happened. It will happen again. But it's only happened a couple times, and it's really helpful for me to keep track of everything. This is also a lot of how I'm keeping track of my grades. I mean, if they're purple, it means they're done and they got 80%, so we're good to go. I do keep these quick check grades more than this, and I've got a little tracker, but other than that, this is where everything is stored. And I have one of these for every class. Anything else, Field?
I think that's wonderful.
Hold on.
Oops. I think that brings us to the point of where we really do need to look at the individual learner. Like what's their pace, what's their interest. And so when you also look at grade levels, like what makes a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, a fifth grader? You know, so it's really those competencies that we are working on and moving them through that. So we are going to have Mrs. Hunter right now join us, and she's just going to add a little bit more onto our pacing grid and more of her like checking for their understanding. So I will have
Okay.
Mrs. Hunter.
I'm gonna share my screen here. On the slides, everything should be linked. So I think you should be able to have access to this once the slides get shared. This is our algebra unit that I just finished with my 7th graders. And mine's organized just a little bit different than Megan's, but all of the same pieces are kind of there. We start at the top, and for this one, I had it in individual boxes based on what they should be completing each week. With each lesson, I have the notes, and those I put into a Google Slides. And what I learned later as we started working into this distance learning is that it was really helpful for some of my kids to have the completed notes also supplied. So I have the work all shown in their notes, and they can use that as a guide as they watch the video, or they can take the skeleton notes and use that as their guide, or they can just write on a plain sheet of paper, however. We really emphasized taking notes though. Before, as we started to get into this, that is a piece that I really tried to emphasize with them, is that it's very important that they take those notes, they use them on their quick checks throughout the unit. They're allowed to use their notes as a way to encourage them to take good notes. And then on our final assessment through the whole thing, they don't use their notes on our unit assessment. Because there I'm assessing more, what are you retaining? And then with each lesson, there's a video link. I left it all linked here for you. You should be able to have access to it. The videos I try to keep them under 10 minutes, and my notes are roughly 4 to 5 slides on a Google Slides. So really breaking this down into little pieces for them to work through at a time. And then they have choices in their practice, just like you saw in Megan's. Not all of the choices are the same, and they have to pick one form of practice. So they can pick the IXLs here. A lot of times they have a quizzes. I found a lot of my learners like that one because it's they can redo it multiple times. And then they do have a practice sheet option, which is in person would be sort of like a worksheet. Now they can either open it on their iPads, fill in the work on a blank piece of paper and send me a picture. They can download it into like a Notability app and write on it on their iPads and send it back to me. So this piece looks a little bit different here in our distance learning period, just because it's another step to share that back with me.
With each lesson, they have the option to watch the video or have a live seminar with me, just like we would have in person. So with our Zoom check-ins, we go through where they should be at, what work they should be working on, and then anybody that wants hangs out and we work through a live seminar together. Some of them continue to hang out after the live seminar and we do the practice together as well. So they'll screen share their IXLs and we'll talk through it, or we'll work through the quizzes together, or we'll do the worksheet together. They'll have it up and I'll have it up and we'll work through the same problems and talking through it all together there. Typically, every 2 lessons, they have a quick check. For this unit, these quick checks were on a Google form set up as a quiz so they could see their scores right away. And they know exactly how they did and where they're at. For me, they have to get 60% to move on. These quick checks are 12 questions, varying in degree from kind of recall questions to more advanced and working through things questions. Yeah, and they have to get that 60%. In order to have that quiz open, they have to do what we call quiz qualifiers. So they have to have all of their practice done leading up to this quiz. And I'll show you my geometry stuff too, and it looks a little bit different in my geometry. And then if they don't get that 60%, they have to go back and choose another form of practice to complete to be eligible for a retake. Or we set up a one-on-one Zoom, work through the stuff together. I might just generate random problems, or we might go back and look at the notes or talk through things. Kind of depends on the kid and what they need. And then they'll take their retake. They all keep track of this in a progress chart that looks similar to what Megan had showed there. We just finished this unit, so this one also looks all purple. It does not always look like this. There's colors all over the place, words, and this is our way of communicating back and forth in one central location. So for each lesson, they have to tell me what form of practice they did so I know what I'm checking and how I can best help them. And then they have to use the color charts or the colors across the top. And like Megan talked about, the red and the yellow aren't as beneficial in this distance learning period, but in school, this is really awesome because I carry around my iPad, I see right away which kids I need to try to connect with when we have that work time, and they can try to connect with each other and see if they can help that way. I also have the where you are option. I have mine as a drop down, so they have to pick one of these because I had a lot of kids that were asking, well, can I go here? Can I go here? Can I go here? And I don't want them to get too far spread out. So this was my way of limiting where they can go. Their names are purple over here or initials, if they're finished with the whole unit. So these 2 learners here, they still have a little bit to finish up for me from last week. So their names aren't purple yet. And just like in Megan's, they're responsible for filling out their own line and their own colors. But I do have these first 2 columns protected so that only I can edit that, because then I can see, yeah, maybe you turned it purple, but if I don't turn your name purple, then I know you're not done with something.
Alana, I did see also that somebody had asked if everybody sees everybody's stuff, and they do. I have seen people that like kids have student ID numbers. You can put their ID numbers in and then it's anonymous so that people don't know where everybody's at. I've seen that as well. But I feel like since we've used this in our classrooms, we've built the expectations that this isn't something that we're like making fun of kids for because they're still on one spot and I'm way up here. It's actually way more beneficial for helping each other than hurting each other. I feel like that's something we should note.
Yes.
If I can just go into, like, I have lab work or partner work in my class. So it allows kids to know, oh, this person is also at that spot or hasn't done this yet. So I can ask them if they want to partner with me, or this person, like you said, this person has done it. So I think it's been a very helpful tool as well, because I have progress charts, but it's a little different than this, but it's pretty similar.
And I found a lot of my students like to work together in groups. So if one of them pulls this up and writes where they're at and what they're finished with, a lot more accountable to filling it in instead of each one of them individually sometimes. They'll just say, hey, I think it's your turn to, as our small group, fill in our progress chart today on what we did. So yes, they do all see it, but for the most part, we don't have a very widespread, at least I haven't experienced it yet. This is only my second unit with my 7th graders doing it this way. And since it's brand new for me, I can only generate material so fast. So a lot of them can't get too far ahead of me. So it's similar to Megan's red line that she talked about on there. I only have so much available for them before they just get stuck and they're dead-ended till I can make more. My geometry, their progress tracker looks very similar. The one big thing that is different with theirs is I don't require the individual lesson practice. So this one looks a little bit messier simply because the columns in here with that individual lesson practice, I'm not checking that in any way. They can choose to do it, they can choose to ignore it. I really, really recommend it. And if they do send it to me, I'll give them feedback and I will change it to colors or write notes in there, whatever they need. What's required is their quiz qualifiers. So they have a review assignment that looks similar to the quiz that they have, and that's their required work and the stuff that I am checking.
So Alana, do you make a new chart for every unit or assignment, or do you just keep adding on to the end?
Oh, good question. I make a new tab. So at the bottom here, we just finished our chapter 8 last week. So now they've started into chapter 9. And this one you can see it's a little more scattered. We just started it. So some learners haven't filled things in yet. Some are flying through some of it. And that's one thing that distance learning has really opened up is this pace that they can, the content's available for them and they are not held back by bells and their classmates being here and them being here and not having availability to some of those seminar pieces. With my geometry, this is an example of what one of my units looks like. They have access to, again, the skeleton notes, the completed notes, the videos. These lessons are a little bit larger. This is a curriculum that was pieced together from different textbooks from one of my other math colleagues that he shared with me. And with the lessons being a little bit bigger, I found it beneficial to create 2 different videos. So there's a video with all the notes and then a video that runs through a ton of examples. Some kids need all those examples. Some kids want to dive in and just try it on their own. So that separation was a really good piece for them and some feedback that I got from them in working through this. So just another way to organize their materials here. That is all I have, Field. If you want to, I will stop screen sharing if there's other questions.
All right, very good. You'll stop screen sharing there. Okay.
Sorry.
Nope, you're fine. I'll get you to stop.
There we go.
All right. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go, oh boy, go into my screen here. Woo! Right, exactly. All that stuff came up there. Okay, so as we end today, I'm gonna get to, oops, into my area here, is that I really want to really probably highlight the biggest thing to me is that making sure that we're even taking the opportunity in distance learning to be innovative and be inventive and paying attention to the entire learner, their interests, their passions, their challenges. Really focus on those strengths, not those deficiencies. As you can see, we really look at that entire learner, of their choices, their pace, where they learn. I always talk about that third teacher of where do they learn best, what environments, and that doesn't really change also in their homes. What's an environment that you learn best into? So in ending, I'm going to get to our, I keep going into our slide here, get past all of these here. I keep going to her first choice. Is that I think as we, in the rush to return to normal, use this time to really consider what parts of our normal are we, what's worth rushing back to? We're seeing a lot of silver lining to this. And I had read an article that talked about tofu is not cheese. And online distance learning is one thing, brick and mortar is another thing. Neither of them, could we say, maybe are better. But what we can say is that they are both different. So some of our learners do better online. Some of them do better in the brick and mortar. Some of them do with the flexibility. And so we really need to, again, is really learning should look and feel like love. That is my entire point here. Make sure we're getting their passions, their interests, getting their challenges, focusing on their strengths. And right now, without all these structures of school and without the testing, we have the freedom. We have the freedom to do this with our learners and for our learners. So we at BBE would love to gather more humans in our process of really spreading this importance of learner-centered learning. Are we there right now with our global connections or our community connections, how we can bring more authentic in there? No, but we're making those small steps will lead to big changes. And that's our goal of having more of our learners co-create with us and getting them to be problem seekers and problem solvers in our communities and in our world. So we want to thank you for joining us today. And hopefully that we can keep this discussion going with those of you that joined us today to really spread this.
Janelle, before you head out, someone was asking, someone only has their students for 1 quarter. Do you have any suggestions for how this could be adapted for such a short time frame?
I think this would be perfect even for a quarter. Some of our teachers just even do it for a small unit. So I guess our suggestion is to really start building that grid and layering that pacing and putting in those choices. And what we're really trying to work on too is having those learners co-create that grid with you so that we're working on their interests and their passions and saying, hey, here are our standards and our content, but what are ways that you will want to be engaged with them? Because I really think these next few weeks of our distance learning, it's going to be tough. And we find that also in our school, like, how do we get them away from just not playing the game of school? How do we get them seeing the importance of what learning is for? So I think a small unit, a small quarter would be an awesome way to do it.
If I can add on to that field, I found that a lot of the stuff that I was making available to the kids, I was already doing in the background. It just wasn't necessarily student ready. So I made tweaks so that it was more student friendly and then making it available to them. So a lot of what we presented, you're already doing in the background in your lesson planning. You're just opening up the door to the learners to that whole process.
And we're finding with this process that those habits of work are really embedding and integrating into this work and our 6 C's, because they cannot just sit back and wait for us to deliver the content. They need to be engaged, and they need to be that it is more than us just having them wait for us to get them the content. All right.
Great.
So that's right. Let's really think back. What are we going to be rushing back to? So thank you again for joining us today. We would love to network and grow our learner-centered learning to all learners. So thank you.
Thanks, Janelle and your team. I want to remind everyone you can follow up on Flipgrid. I put a link in the comment in the Zoom chat and in the YouTube live chat. The attendance CEU information, that is a good link too. I'll get that in the other chat as well.
Right. Deb, when we go to this Google Meet,
we have, if you would like to start a Google Meet, you're welcome to.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. All right. Very good. I didn't know if that was the net we were moving.
There were some changes between Friday and today.
Okay.
So if you want to go to a Google Meet, I can help you get one started. Otherwise,
we're good. We're
Okay.
good.
Otherwise, shifting that conversation to Flipgrid is great because it provides that asynchronous piece too, and allows that blend between our YouTube followers and our Zoom followers to merge into one big ol' happy people to think about learning differently.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Everybody from BBE area, amazing session. Thank you so much. I am going to be closing down this room. So I think I might close it down before Devin is fast enough to paste in. But all
That's
the CEU information is available right on the website. There's a CEU tab right on the site, and you can click that to be able to complete that form. And you're able to complete that form either after each session or at the end of the day. Devin, thank you so much for modding. You always do such a wonderful job. Janelle and Peggy, thank you so much for sharing this expertise.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Have a good
And
afternoon.
everybody come on back at 1 p.m. Central.